Hi, everyone. Hi, Grant. You made
Hey,
it.
girl. We made it, Grace. We made it.
We made it. We made it. We made it. All right, here we go. So, hello, everyone out there. My name is Grace Liao, and I'm one of the engagement coordinators at the engagement team of Quantic School of Business and Technology. So, I want to welcome you, those of you who are trickling in. And to my right, but maybe to your left, I'm not sure, is Grant Glazer, who's our special guest today. Um, and we'll talk to him in a moment, but let me take care of a few things. It brings us such great pleasure to welcome you to our second episode of Quantic Conversations here on LinkedIn, where we bring students from Quantic and staff and other community members to the stage for an authentic conversation. Invisible to you, but very much present and with us is the amazing Kelsey Duggan from our marketing team, and she's here to make sure all systems are go. So thank you so much, Kelsey. Now today's session will be about 45 minutes long, and it is recorded, so you can come back here and watch it and rewatch it later if you need to. And please feel free, and we encourage you to share this out with your friends and family as a great way to understand Quantic from a very personal lens as we have this conversation. Now, while Grant and I are having our conversation, all of you out in LinkedIn land are absolutely welcome to use the comment box and really join in with us as part of the conversation as well. This event ultimately is not really about myself or Grant. It's really about all of us. If you have questions for Grant, please go ahead and type that into the comment box and we will do our best to get to them. We'll probably use the last 10 minutes or so for questions and answers. Now, I need to do some shout outs before we get into our conversation. So, of course, shout outs to all of our rock star, culturally intelligent, high achieving, disruptor minded, change making Quantic students. So, if you're a Quantic student, we want to see you shout right back out to us. And Quantic students are literally all over the world, which is always so exciting to see. And we do want to also make sure we shout out to those of you who are not yet Quantic students or friends yet. We warmly welcome you as our special guest in this Quantic conversation. It's our hope that today's conversation will give you insight into what the Quantic experience is really like, and through the lens of one of our alum. So there really will be hopefully something for everyone out there who's listening in. Now, now I can talk about Grant. Let me introduce him a little bit. With over a decade of experience in technology and software, Grant has worked in a variety of roles, including business development, solution engineering, learning design, strategy, sales enablement, and executive coaching. Currently, Grant works in leadership development as an executive coach, helping new leaders on their journey toward greatness. Working one-on-one and in small group sessions, he identifies strengths and growth areas to support onboarding, ramp, and ongoing development. Now, I met Grant, I checked the calendar, on June 18th, 2020. So it's been 2 years. And I met him during his admissions interview. And our conversation honestly hasn't stopped since the time that I interviewed him. And he has since completed his Executive MBA degree with our program successfully. And this was in September 2021. So he's a fairly recent grad, but it's been several months now. And so here we are today having really just another conversation. So, Grant, before I get going, I want to give you a moment to let you say hi to the audience.
Yeah, Grace, thanks. Hi, everyone. I see we have folks all around the world. We have Houston, Texas, Vegas, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, lots of Canadians, fellow South African here, Nigeria. Let's see who else. More Houston, Texas. So I'm amazed at the audience we have. I am honored and it's a pleasure to be here, Grace. I think we've had our 2-year anniversary just pass. And so the fact that we get to be back online, just how we originally met, warms my heart. So thanks for having me back. It's always a pleasure to be joined with the Quantic community.
Absolutely. It's we just have a good time when we talk. So why
We
not
do.
do it in front of a lot of other people, right? So, yes, all of you out there, oh my goodness. I'm looking at the comment box right now. Thank you for shouting back out to us. Okay, so let's just to warm us up a little bit. Um, I'll start with an easy question, Grant. What is something that you like to do in the morning to start your day right?
Yeah, it's a lovely question. I mean, nothing I think fundamentally different from probably what many have heard or read recently, but since the world is so different from it was 2 years ago, and we're all doing this a lot, um, this idea of how do I show up and be more present myself has been a theme of mine lately. And so, one thing I do, I'm not sure if I do it in the morning as much as it begins the night before, but my phone doesn't come into the room. And so, I leave my phone at my desk here before I go to bed each night. And what I think that helps me do in the morning is there's about an hour from when I get up to when I jump in front of my computer where I just don't see a screen. And so I know that's not like fundamentally new. Lots of books do that. There's a really cool book called How to Break Up with Your Phone, which recommends doing that. So if folks ever want to read a little more about it, um, that is a really awesome way to wake up and then do any monotonous or mundane task that really gets me a little bit more focused. Some people really enjoy yoga and meditation in the morning. Um, I have become a bit of a coffee snob lately, and I have really cool coffee shops on my street. So I bought some beans, and I get to make coffee in the morning. And so I grind the beans, and I put them into the portafilter, and I make my cup of coffee. And so for me, that's kind of just this simple, monotonous way to be, I guess, oddly present with whatever that might be doing. Some people do that by brushing their teeth and just noticing that you're brushing your teeth and not thinking about or looking at the text messages or the Slack messages or the emails that are coming in. And so every morning I love to try and be just a tiny bit more present. And actually, if I can steal the thunder for a second, Grace, something that I sometimes do
Yeah.
with the folks that I get to work on this topic on presence is I ask them to answer a question. And so maybe for everyone watching and everyone listening, you can use the comment box and on a scale from 1 to 5, 5 being I am here fully engaged, not multitasking. My kids aren't in the background. The dog isn't barking. 5 is like, I'm dialed in. And 1 is, there's a lot going on in my life. I have music playing. My partner's in the background. I'm not able to be fully here. I'm curious from everyone online, 1 to 5, 5 super focused, 1 not so engaged. How present are you all able to be here right now in this moment? And there's no right or wrong answer. 5 is not great and 1 is not bad, but just out of curiosity. So 1 to 5, I'd love to see some numbers. It's a wonderful question you can ask yourself, and you can also ask people you work with. So I see 5 from Eugene, lots of 5s, 2 from Chi. I appreciate your honesty. Christina's 4. Eric said a 2. Thanks for your honesty. 1 from Marlene. I appreciate the honesty. Lots of 3s. Feeding the kids breakfast. Absolutely. That's totally fair. So you can see all of that. And I love that. So now we've just brought a little bit more awareness. Even asking that question helps us
Mm.
all get a sense of how focused are we able to be. And then I'll end by saying, thinking of your number, what do you think it would take to get 1 increment above? So if you're a 2, what would it take to get to a 3? And if you're a 4, what would it take to get to a 5?
Mm.
And it's a wonderful exercise that I can go through myself, or you can go through with yourself. And what can I do? Can I turn my phone upside down? Can I close the door to my office? Can I maybe give my children an extra snack and say I'm going to be away for 10 minutes? And that can help bring a little bit more awareness. Anyway, I won't steal your thunder, Grace. It's a fun thought. I wanted to
Oh,
see
there's
what
no
everyone had.
stealing of thunder here. That's okay. This is perfect. This is um I remember mentioning this with the first Quantic conversation we did with Bertine Krevcore West, and I'll say here also to the audience, you grab a notebook or have your phone handy in the notes section, jot some of the things that you're hearing down. It's you said it, Grant, where you're not the things you shared may not they exist already. We've heard
Mhm.
these things before, but it's sometimes it is so important to hear it again. The need to the reminder to be present and building certain rituals and only I know myself best and you know yourself best. We each have our own things that we do to kind of set ourselves up, whether it's, I love the idea of doing the night before. I'm notoriously bad about that. I see my son getting ready the night before. I'm like, oh, you're so together. And I'm the one rushing in the morning. But there are some times and some days where I am just incrementally a little bit more ready because I did something that morning, whether it's sitting, whether it's doing yoga or any of those things. But hearing it from you and then hearing it in this context and then you asking that question just puts it in the front of our mind a little bit more. So I think that's so important. I'm seeing the work that you do already applying to us, which is fantastic. All right, so and I think we're going to probably visit this theme a few times in our conversation, which is great, about being present and all of that. So let me come to your Quantic story a little bit. I want to ask you a couple questions along those lines, because that's how we are even here in the first place, because you were a part of our program. I'd like to go back in time to before you applied to Quantic and decided to go this way. When you were looking at MBA programs in schools, what were some of your criteria?
Wonderful thought. Yeah, I mean, the journey toward doing a master's had been with me, I think, since I finished undergrad. And so I graduated in 2011 from a school here in Ontario, Canada called Western University. Shout out to all the Canadians in the audience. And as I jumped into the workforce, I had always this thought and desire to consider and go back and do a master's. But I think, like many folks do, there are these pillars of criteria that pop up as you go through that kind of due diligence. And so the themes and the thoughts that came up for me were this idea of going back to school, so leaving a career. So I guess the notion of, am I going to do this full time or part time? Another one was, am I going to consider a school that, I think it would be remiss if people didn't think about, is there this name brand recognition or cachet? I mean, a lot of schools do a really good job, almost a better job of marketing themselves by brand recognition than they do the quality of education, which is a whole other topic. But I'd say brand recognition. So am I looking at the lists that we all see online? And the other option was this idea of networking. Lots of mentors and peers said a graduate program, especially an MBA, is one that you want to find one where you can connect with and find people to talk to and a network you can build. Because sometimes the network is as much, if not more important than some of the formal learning. And then, of course, the last one was the financial aspect. I mean, I think so. If I were to consolidate those four, it was full-time or part-time, the looking at a school that's recognized or accredited or has a brand name, the networking capabilities or possibilities, and then the financial aspect of it. And if I had to add a fifth, of course, it is, what about the actual learning, the fundamental learning and the knowledge? What does the MBA consist of? Is it generic? Is it specialized? Does it have something that is very focused, or is the aperture slightly larger? And so those were kind of the five thematic, I think, elements that popped up for me as I was going on that fun journey of, am I going to go back to school? Am I going to take a program? Am I going to leave my job and go do something full time? Those were some of the themes.
Yeah, and they're all incredibly important, and no doubt everyone considering our program, it's not even just our program, just any the idea of going back to school as a full-time working adult, or just an adult with lots of responsibilities. Something that you and I, when we were chatting yesterday, opportunity costs came up. What is the opportunity cost for making certain choices? And small question, how did you even find out about Quantic? How did you first hear about it?
Oh, it was a fun one. So, I was doing all of that fun searching and Googling. And I think the very first time I actually heard about Quantic was from a colleague at work. Colleague of mine, we were in a meeting at work, and he was, ironically, we were talking about presence, and I think he was a little bit distracted. And I was like, "Hey, what's going on? Can we, we're in this meeting together." And he's like, "Sorry, I'm just finishing a module or finishing a question." And I happened to ask, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm doing this this online MBA program, and I'm just finishing a quick econ module." And I said, what are you talking about, on your phone?" Yeah. And then he pulls his phone out and he goes, "Take a look." and he kind of showed me, I don't know, module 5 of microeconomics. And I remember being super surprised. I actually think it was still when Quantic was called Smartly before you guys had the name change.
Yeah.
And so that's when I started doing all this digging, and that was probably easily a year and a half, almost 2 years before I actually formally applied. But that was how I first heard about it, and then I did all of the online scrounging around, watched a lot of YouTube videos. I saw the website, I did all the digging, and my world was opened to Quantic School of Business and Tech.
It always has this, there's always a story. There's an origin story for all of it. And those of you out there, go ahead and put in the comment box how you ended up in Quantic. If you are a Quantic student or you are a graduate, it'd be fun to kind of share stories. I think what's really great about conversations like this, and people, all of you out there watching, listening, you're hearing yourself in the things that Grant is sharing. You're thinking, oh yeah, that's what happened to me, or maybe something slightly different, which is also really important to hear. So it's both validating and kind of inspirational to hear everyone's version of their story, I believe. Now, a second question I have, you've graduated and it's been some time. I don't know if you've touched any Quantic anything since then, but since you've graduated and you finished the program, you have the full set of knowledge that you is part of you now. What have you found that you are using in your day-to-day or general professional life that was gained through the EMBA program?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I remember a couple mentors saying to me, there's a big difference between kind of finishing your undergrad degree and going straight into a master's program like a business graduate or MBA program. And then there's a big difference between doing your undergraduate, going to work for a bit, and then coming back and doing school. And I think there's a lot of merit to that, because now you actually have some wood behind the arrow. You're actually doing the work, and then you do a graduate program. I would add a third category to that, which is the benefit Quantic brought for me, which was not only did I do an undergraduate program, go to work, but then I went back and did Quantic as a master's program, but while still working. And not only while still working, but not while working and then going to a night lecture or watching a night video. I mean, I think a lot of people that have taken or looked at the Quantic curriculum and how it's brought, it's this super engaging, not textbook heavy, video-based lecture learning. It is micro engagement every 8 seconds or so, where I'm having to fill in a word or answer an equation, whether that's a silly joke or a real economics equation or statistics equation. And so, long story long, the applicability of what Quantic taught me during the program with what I was doing at work was very aligned. Like, there were moments where, and the example I'll give is, prior to this role, I was in a role that was around strategy and innovation. So I was working internally in strategy and innovation. What that meant was I was looking at current trends and trying to predict future trends for what learning and learning enablement would be for the technology world. And I'd never formally done a business undergraduate degree. I had an undergrad in psychology and communications. And I remember doing the strategy module in Quantic. And they were talking about this notion of blue ocean strategy and red ocean strategy, which for many people who've done a business degree probably know that already, or people that are just generate. But I'd never done that. I'd never been introduced to the concept of blue ocean and red ocean strategy. And I remember my mind being blown. I thought it was fascinating. Quantic also has this hilarious writers that write things in such a colloquial, humorous, kind of easygoing, and you're not reading a dry textbook that's telling you things very theoretically. They're talking about it in situational, really understandable, digestible ways. And so anyway, I'm learning about blue ocean and red ocean strategy. Fast forward a week later, where I'd finished that module, I was asked to make a presentation to our team about the current state of learning technology and the future state of learning technology and where we could go. And I very specifically remember on that actual slide, one of the slides I presented back to my team, I jokingly introduced the idea of red ocean products and blue ocean products. And people on the group were like, well, what does that mean? And I was like, well, let me share with you what I've just learned. And this idea was that, red ocean is not innovative, things that are status quo, staying where they are today. And this blue ocean idea is thinking big, taking risks, failing, but maybe succeeding one of those small times. And so full circle, as I was going through the program, sure, there were times where, you're taking research statistics that may not have applied to me as specifically in my role, but I would be surprised if many of the folks on the call and those who watch who do take Quantic don't see some level of connection or applicability to their day jobs, whether it's in sales, whether it's in marketing, whether it's in project management, product management, or any facet of business, because the curriculum is so vast. You're almost guaranteed to strike a module or hit a module that then talks about or objectively discusses the things you're doing in your daily life. And the fact that then you can pivot from what you're learning to what you're doing is really cool. I would imagine, I didn't do it, but I would imagine it's very different from leaving your work, going to do a program, and then coming back versus Wednesday, I was doing this at work. Thursday, I'm learning this at Quantic. Friday, I'm putting it together in a presentation to share. Like, that's pretty cool, powerful stuff. So I thought that was really, really exciting when that happened a few times throughout the program.
That is, gosh, so powerful. Let me just reflect a little bit back to what you just shared. And it's almost as if you're reading my mind, because I was listening to you. I'm like, oh, I wonder if he's going to say this. So folks, by the way, we planned a little bit of this, but we don't know what each other is going to say. But one of the points you made, which is so incredibly important, is because of the way the Quantic program and platform is designed. People joke around about it, learning in the palm of your hand, or, learning in my pocket. But the point where, as a working professional, busy life, that this learning is woven into your life. So it's happening concurrently with your day job, or many people have their own businesses. And it also works into personal life and feeding your babies and children. But the power of having the learning integrated into your day to day, it's almost a given that it's going to apply to something at some point. And I also really appreciate what you said, that not every aspect of the program learning is going to immediately apply to me. Like, for instance, data and decisions. When I did that, I thought, this is amazing, but this is not my wheelhouse at all. Strategy, totally agree. When I did that one, I thought, this makes sense. Markets and economies, brand new to me. Economy and economics in general, but I see the power of learning that, and it does apply, even if it's not in a tangible way. It's changed our thinking entirely, I think. And you mentioned that your undergrad was in liberal arts, so it wasn't a business learning background that you came from, but how beautifully this is still fit in to your day-to-day, and that you did a presentation on blue ocean and red ocean. So that's how you know a student's learned something, when it's actually used in that way. And in effect, you've taught other people what you learned, didn't you?
If I can throw one more thought in there, Grace, because
Absolutely, yeah.
we're riffing and obviously sharing all the Quantic love. Another really cool revelation for me was the dispelling of pre-existing and preconceived notions I had about certain topics. And so what I mean by that is, I had all of these things in my head about what I would hate and what I would love when I looked at the curriculum. I'm like, accounting, terrible. Economics, boring. And I'll say what was shocking is the amount that I was proved wrong as I went through it. And maybe that's a testament to the way that the program is built in the curriculum, and that it's not textbook heavy. You're not picking up this massive accounting textbook. But for example, I don't think I'm going to ever be a great accountant. And I don't think I'm going to be balancing books. But it's fundamental, I'm sure, to anyone who's in business to have at least a general conceptual understanding of assets and liabilities, and being able to do rough bookkeeping and ledger keeping. But I thought I was going to slog through it. Like, I thought it would be, I remember looking at the curriculum of the 8 core modules and being like, this one I'll enjoy, this one I'll enjoy, this one I'll hate. And the first module we had to take, as I'm sure you remember, Grace, was accounting. And I was like, here we go, starting off terrible, gonna just, grind my teeth and get through it. I was oddly surprised at how eye-opening and how much I enjoyed certain modules I thought I would hate. For example, accounting was, while still not my favorite subject, and I'm still not going to ever go be like a CFA or chartered accountant, I was pleasantly surprised at how much I actually enjoyed going through it. Sure, there were times I still was like, but I was really surprised at how much it was eye-opening. And another example was economics. I thought economics would be dry and really boring. Like, price elasticity of demand was not something I thought that I would walk away knowing a lot about or being excited about. And now I see articles, or I read like the Wall Street Journal, or I read a couple of friends that did economics in their undergrad. And not only do these concepts mean something in greater detail to me, but I actually enjoyed learning about it. Like, now we can talk about how the supply chain is backing everything up and no one can get furniture and prices of lumber have gone up, and go to the grocery store and you're seeing the price of bananas go through the roof. And you have like way more conceptual understanding of why that's happening. And it's kind of cool. It's really, really cool. And so I stood corrected when I did micro and macroeconomics through Quantic and accounting, being like, these are the modules I'm going to hate. I was surprisingly excited to do that. I was like, wow, okay, I stand corrected.
It's not a bad thing to stand corrected, is it, right? It's as we get older, we are actually okay with being with our expectations being flipped on their head. I'm going to ask you a little bit more right along the lines of what you just shared, because what you just said is incredibly powerful, because we have to be honest about who we are coming into something when we make these choices to learn. There's a lot of second guessing. There's a lot of um, wondering or assuming, a lot of assumptions on, okay, I just want to learn this, but I don't, maybe this is not going to be comfortable for me. Like, for instance, something more along the lines of accounting or finance or those. But then, so that attitude we come in, that mindset is really important to recognize. Now, confidence, I want to ask you about that, because that is a key concept entering into a learning program, and then what happens after. So you just said a few things um, that really your perspective is quite different. Now your ears hear different things, and when you hear other people talk, um, you might understand just a little bit more because of the things you learned. So um, talk about what learning does for confidence as a professional, or what has it done for you as a professional going through this program.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk about confidence and how it helps manifest it. Okay. Um, why don't we try it this way? Everyone listening, think back to. I'm assuming many of us have jobs and we work. Some of us might be students still. Think back to a time when you were in a meeting, or a team meeting, or a one-on-one, or perhaps you're even watching a financial earnings call or listening to a financial earnings call, or you were reading a prospectus, or perhaps you were reading an article on HBR or the Wall Street Journal, or a local article in your country about a business. And they were referencing things that may not have initially made a ton of sense. And you picked up maybe 60% of it. So a good way to, I think, the metaphor I think I'm trying to paint here is, doing an executive MBA or an MBA program is not going to necessarily make us experts in, we're not going to walk out being these business zealots. But it is, for me at least, it gave me an incredible awareness of the Rubik's Cube that is a business and how it can operate. I mean, we do a module on marketing, you do a module on economics. You're not going to be an economist tomorrow or a marketing maven tomorrow, but maybe that is your specialty and that's where you can double down on. But what doing this program over 14 months brought for me in the level of confidence I was able to feel is a general awareness and an understanding for a lot of the different topics that make up a business. So now going back, think back to that story you just pulled up in your mind. Now fast forward 14 months, you've gone through a 14-month MBA with Quantic or the executive track. I would that you would reread that article or re-jump into that team meeting or go back into that prospectus you were reading. And maybe it was 60% before, but maybe now you're 80 or 85% aware, maybe even 90% aware. You now understand the term EBITDA a little bit more. You have a clear sense of what CAC means, customer acquisition. You have a clear understanding of what product market fit is. Opportunity cost. You now know what that means when someone references that. So, and then if you don't, you now have the access to a platform where you can revisit and relearn that. I mean, I can tell you, I'm not even kidding. I have the Quantic app on my phone still, and I don't know if people can see that. I still go through and doing some elective modules. Like right now, I'm doing the blockchain one just for fun because NFTs and blockchain are huge, and I revisit them. So I've gone back to my economics or accounting module to revisit and relearn something. And so in summary, I'd say I think that's probably the level of confidence that a program like this gives you. It rounds out your awareness and understanding of the world of business. You're not going to make you an expert overnight, but I feel that much more confident engaging in a business conversation or reading about businesses than I did before. And for me, that's an order of magnitude more than I could have hoped for from the jump.
Yeah. Love the way you explain that. And one of the things that we, in the admissions process, when we're interviewing candidates and often questions come, I know that one of the things that we will say is that you will acquire the language of business. You will have vocabulary that you didn't have before. Well, you're all hearing it now from a real person who finished the program that it's true. So the promise of that is real. And I dare say that it gives everyone, I think everyone should have a business education. Actually, now that I've been through it and I've watched so many students pass through our doors, I see the power of having that generalist understanding of how business and organizations work, because that's what the world is. And so I vote for business education starting from primary school. All right, so audience, we're at the half past of the hour mark. If you have questions for Grant, go ahead and drop them in the comment box. I'm going to ask one or two more. I actually have a ton of questions for Grant, but let me make sure I give the audience chances to ask him a question. But Grant, let me ask you, just chatting with you and knowing you over the last two years, I still can't believe it's been 2 years, and all of your responses, what I always can hear from you, and I think the audience can too, is who you are as a person, which is very much present in all the things that you do. So do you have a motto or a quote that fuels you, that excites you, that kind of inspires you?
Oof, I love that you asked, Grace. Maybe it is knowing for each other for 2 years that you knew that was a great question. There's many. The one that stands out as you ask, that is and I'm sure people have maybe heard this before, it's a Maya Angelou quote. And I think it goes, people won't remember what you said, people won't remember what you did, but people will remember how you made them feel. And it has, yeah, that's a quote that sticks out in my mind. People won't remember what you did, people won't remember what you said, people will remember how you made them feel. And I know that's esoteric and up in the clouds, but I think it speaks a lot of truth, which is whether it's a business interaction or a personal interaction, a friend or a lover, a partner, or just someone you randomly encounter on the street. Oftentimes the words or the actions that you do will be short-lived, but then how they actually think back to how you made them feel is what will really stand out. And so I love going into all of the interactions I have now, with a good knowledgeable understanding of what I'm going to talk about and the actions that we're going to do and the business outcomes that we're driving. But at the end of the day, these are human beings in my work that I work with on a daily basis. And in a week from our interaction, in 2 weeks from our interaction, I'd love them to think back and say, how did I leave feeling? How did I leave feeling with that half hour or hour I spent working with Grant? Or if it's my manager or my boss, am I making them feel appreciated? I'm making them feel like they're doing good work and they're supporting me. So that's a quote that sticks out for me.
It's a good one. Everyone out there, write it down. It's important. We do have a couple questions, so let me switch over
Please.
here. So let's see. All right. From Sumaya, question is, what's the best and worst part of your job?
Sumaya, thank you for the question. The best part of my job is that I get to interface and work with human beings every single day and new personalities. Currently, I am actively kind of working with or coaching about 15 folks, and I can join a call at 10 a.m. and work with one personality, and then at 2 p.m. and work with someone with a totally different personality. And I get the benefit of jumping between those two and seeing just how differently people show up. And then in turn, that lets me learn and become a chameleon and learn traits that I want to adopt or traits that I don't. I'd say that's the most exciting and the thing I enjoy the most. The least favorite aspect, with that many people, it can be hard to show up and give someone 115%. The work I do is very human capital and sweat equity focused. It means I am giving my time, they're giving me their time for half an hour at a time. And obviously, as that multiplies 15, 20, 25 people, I need to be very mindful and be very cautious of how I block time so that I'm not doing 4 calls back to back. And back to that Maya Angelou quote, I don't want to make that person feel at the 5th call of the day that I'm tired and they're being rushed through and they're not getting the time that they deserve. And so I'm not sure if that's the least favorite, but it's certainly the most challenging is how do I give the 15th person the same level of care, concern, and focus as the first?
That makes absolute sense. The whole principle of being present with whoever you're interacting with and giving them your best, but also realizing there's bandwidth limits for all of us. So challenge, I think, is a good way of putting it. All right, from Frank, he's asking, what was the most difficult Quantic subject?
Frank, I'll keep it short and sweet. Definitely research and statistics, probably similar for you, Grace. I did research and statistics undergrad for psychology, so I had a bit of familiarity with it. But I will say I'm still not the best with very long and intricate formulas and long formulas. So it was still very well delivered. Shout out to the Quantic writers for making it funny and very applicable, but I think it was still my most challenging.
All I remember is Bayes rule, vaguely, very, very vaguely. All right, another question from Jose is, did any modules surprise you, unexpectedly resonate with you?
Ooh, great question, Jose. Yes. So I live in Toronto, Canada. So I'm not in America, and I think Quantic has a little bit of the focus as an American company. So oddly enough, I chose one of my 3 specialties to be US business law. And I will say I was, while it wasn't 1,000% applicable to me because there's some subtle changes in Canadian law and how LLCs and limited partnerships are formed, I actually really enjoyed learning about the difference of like what an incorporation does versus a limited liability. And it was really interesting to see about why you would structure a business the way you do to maybe shield yourself from certain liability, to kind of divide up equity and ownership. And so oddly enough, as a Canadian, taking US business law was the most unexpectedly resonating module for me.
That's a great share. And for those of you who aren't in the Quantic program, the reason why Grant is able to take these courses, and he showed us on his phone, is that after students graduate, they actually still have access to content and new courses that roll out. So
For
the
life.
idea of lifelong learning, we deliver on that. As long as Quantic's around, you'll be able to learn, which is fantastic. US law was definitely not one that I would have gone near, but now that I've heard you talk about it, I might consider it.
It was fun.
So it was fun. Tesfa I'm so sorry if I didn't pronounce your name right. What new skills did you gain from the EMBA program?
Oof, I mean, that's a lot big one to unpack. Like, I think the broad answer is general business literacy for me was improved. So, most of my business learning came from on-the-job experience. Again, an undergrad in psychology and communications. And I entered the business world through sales development as a sales development rep. And I learned a lot of the business language through work, which is great. And I think I couldn't speak more highly of learning business by doing business. But the biggest thing I learned and the skill I learned was general business acuity and literacy. Now I could speak the language a little bit better. I understood concepts a little bit better. I picked up on and I recognized things that much better. And so that would probably be the top takeaway for me.
That's great. I completely agree with that one as well. Business literacy, so powerful. It just increases. So Mark has a question. This will probably be our last one before we start to wrap up. He wants to know, what is your best tip for time management?
Ooh, Mark, I love that you asked. I'll give you something that I talk about with my coachees all the time, because I work with a lot of folks that are really, really busy. And they always often say, everything's a priority all the time. How do I know what's important and what's not? And so the simple answer is, I'm sure many folks have heard about this, is this idea of calendar time blocking. Whether you use Outlook or Gmail, I block my calendar with certain specific times. I call them mindfulness breaks, or MB. And so I'll spend a time in the beginning of the week or on Sunday, and I'll go through my calendar for the week, and I'll make sure that I put in 15 or 30-minute blocks between major calls. That's the simple answer. Here's the really fun, exciting metaphor I sometimes share, and this, many of you will probably laugh and think, Grant, this is ridiculous, you're crazy. And some of you might find this fun. But I was working with a sales leader that happened to be a dietitian, and so this metaphor came to mind. I would invite everyone to take a look at their calendar for the week, your work calendar. And you can probably recognize the calls where you need to be fully engaged, a call where you are expected to either talk or present or ask questions. And I would mark that, maybe color code it or label it. That's a full fat call. We're talking about milk. That's a full fat call. That's full fat table heavy cream. Then you can probably see the calls where, like, you can be kind of a passive listener, but you might be called on, or you might have a question to be asked, or you need to be there, but not 1,000% there. That's a that's like a 2% milk. That's a 2% call. And then you'll have the really kind of passive calls where it's like an all hands call, or it's something where you're just listening in on, and you don't even need to be on camera. You're just listening to an update. You can kind of be doing multitasking things on the side. That's a skim milk call. Another metaphor you can use is a traffic light, right? Red, yellow, green. The red calls, you need to be there. You're there. It's Grace and me talking one-on-one. I can't be texting on my phone. Grace and Ira's call this morning would be red or full fat. The call this afternoon where I'm kind of just listening, but they might say, hey, Grant, what are your thoughts on this? That's going to be a yellow call, or 2%. And then later in the afternoon, I have a company all hands call where our CEO gets on and talks to all 80,000 employees. I am not really participating in that, but there might be some cool nuggets that I'll pick up. That's a skim milk call. And so when you look at your calendar, I then try and make sure that there's not too many full fat or red calls. Because if I have more than 4 or 5 a day, and everyone here knows your own personal limits, if I go through 5 or 4 red calls from noon or from morning to noon, I know that I'm going to be scrambled eggs by the time I get to 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock. So I try and look at my calendar and I see where the red, the yellow, and the green is. And then I include little gray mindfulness breaks in between. And so I'd encourage everyone to take a peek at your books, and you'll know your limits. For me, I know that if I'm doing more than 4 or 5 fully engaged calls in a day, it's going to tax my mental ability a lot. And so I try and cap my days at 4 or 5 full fat calls. But if I see a day that has lighter ones, that's fine. And then the last thing, Mark, is I'll wrap because I'm getting overly wordy here, is simple things. Mindfulness breaks, don't block it off and then do more work. Try and get up and grab a cup of coffee, or I go outside and get some fresh air. Simple, these aren't novel things, but hold yourself accountable to it. Really go outside, even if it's just for 5 minutes, take a breath of fresh air and come back. I surprise myself all the time that just walking downstairs, opening my front door, and taking a breath of city air can help just change my disposition and get me refocused. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate the question.
It's a good one that we struggle with, every single one of us, and it's both prioritization, bandwidth, recognition, the full fat one. So that's the first time I've ever heard that. So this was a full fat call. That's what you're
This is a
saying.
full fat call. Not a bad thing. And full fat, by the way, tastes the best, but it takes the most as well.
Fair, fair. I think that's going to be the main takeaway for most of us. But I'm going to look at my calendar, and I might have to do a coding system. Great stuff, Grant, really is. All right, folks, we are actually we are at time now, so I'm going to wrap up but I'm going to squeeze in one tiny question for you, Grant, if that's okay. If we spoke to one of your previous teachers from either primary or middle school, how would they describe you?
Curious.
Curious. There you go.
The joke has always been, I don't have a middle name. My name is just Grant Glazer. Thanks, mom and dad. I never got a middle name, but if I did have one, like Curious George, I've been joked by my teachers and my friends in elementary and primary schools, Curious Grant. And if I often do this exercise with my coachees, people can see here, it's called Live Your Values deck. It's a deck of 72 cards where they have values. One of my top 10 values is curiosity. I think if we can all bring a level of curiosity and humility to our world, it would be a better place. Because who doesn't like to be curious? You can ask fun questions. It's how I got to know you, Grace. It's how you got to know me. When we're curious and we have a sense of humility about each other, it makes it all better. At least I think.
Oh, I agree. And that's why we hang out. So I'm going to leave it at that. Curious and humble. I think those are some really key takeaways. Well, that's the time we have. We hope that you've all enjoyed this conversation, and hopefully it creates more conversation for you. Grant, you may get a few LinkedIn requests, so just know that kind of came with a package. In general, out there, if any of you are wanting to learn more about Quantic's program, you can go to our LinkedIn page and find us, or just even drop us a message. There are ways we can answer your questions. Let's see. I think that is a wrap until the next Quantic conversation. And thank you all of you for taking time to listen and join in. Super fun. Grant, I don't know how to thank you even more than I have. This was great fun. I'm so glad we got to finally do this. And you can be sure this is not the last time that I'm going to ask you to do something for Quantic.
Such a pleasure. Always a pleasure, Grace. And thanks to everyone. The comments and the questions were awesome. I appreciate it. It was awesome, folks. Thanks for jumping on.
Bye, everyone.